Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of the most dramatic, high-stakes corporate battles in all of American history. Honestly, if you think today's corporate takeovers are wild, just wait until you see the absolute chaos that went down during the Gilded Age. We're talking legendary titans, utterly ruthless tactics, and a totally unhinged fight for control over the very arteries of a growing nation.
So let me ask you this. How much has Wall Street actually changed since the 19th century? And, maybe more importantly, how much has remained exactly the same? I want you to keep this question right in the back of your mind as we go, because what we're about to explore is a historical conflict that acts as a perfect mirror to modern-day corporate drama. The technology might be different, sure, but human ambition? Yeah, that hasn't changed a bit.
All right, to really understand this, we need to set the scene. Picture this, New York City, 1867. It's before sunrise. Horse-drawn carriages are just crowding the cobblestone streets of Lower Manhattan. Up above, the telegraph wires are absolutely humming with frantic, non-stop messages. Inside these smoky boardrooms, massive fortunes are being made and completely lost in a matter of hours. And right in the middle of this chaotic, high-stakes scene, one single railroad company is about to trigger Wall Street's very first hostile takeover.
Okay, let's dive right into this setup with Section 1. The Railroad Revolution.
So right after the Civil War, America was undergoing this massive economic expansion, and it was fueled entirely by a giant railroad infrastructure boom. Railroads were essentially the 19th century version of the internet. They connected literally everything. There was this unprecedented demand for freight transportation to move heavy industry, coal, steel, agricultural goods. Because of this, the competition among railroad companies was incredibly fierce. Whoever won would control the entire flow of American commerce. And this boom, it created the ultimate prize for a brand new wave of Wall Street financiers who looked at railroads not just as transportation, but as giant floating pools of capital.
Which brings us to our main players. Section 2, Wall Street's first titans.
In one corner, we have Cornelius Vanderbilt, famously known as the Commodore. Vanderbilt was an incredibly aggressive empire builder. He was already fabulously wealthy from steamships, and his strategy was super physical. He wanted to literally buy, acquire, and consolidate actual railroads so he could control the entire network. But then, look at his opposition, Daniel Drew, Jay Gould, and Jim Fisk. These three guys were the directors of the Erie Railroad, and their strategy couldn't have been more different. They were cunning speculators. They weren't interested in building anything. They were all about financial agility and paper-based warfare. It was physical wealth and consolidation going head-to-head with ruthless financial acrobatics.
So let's see how this actually played out. Section 3. Battle for the Erie.
Now, what's really interesting about this part is exactly how the Erie directors fought back. They used a weapon known as watered stock. By definition, this is the tactic of issuing additional unbacked company shares to dilute a buyer's ownership percentage. But honestly, think of it less as a standard financial tool and way more as a weapon. If someone is trying to buy up a majority of your company's pie, you simply make more pies out of thin air so they can never, ever get a majority slice.
Let's actually walk through these steps like a blueprint to a heist, because it's pretty wild. Step 1. Vanderbilt, throwing his immense wealth around, attempts a hostile takeover. He goes into the market and starts buying massive amounts of Erie stock, fully believing he's cornering the market. But then we hit Step 2. The Erie directors, Drew, Gould, and Fisk, literally fire up a printing press in the basement. I'm not kidding. They illegally print vast amounts of watered stock and just dump it onto the market. So every single time Vanderbilt buys shares, there are suddenly thousands more available. Finally, Step 3, despite spending absolute millions, Vanderbilt's ownership percentage actually shrinks. This brilliantly simple, incredibly illegal tactic completely stripped a billionaire of his control over the company.
And just to put this into perspective, to emphasize the sheer scale of what was happening here, adjusted for today's value, this was a billion-dollar battle for corporate control. A staggering, almost incomprehensible amount of money for the 1860s, completely locked up in a tug-of-war between one man's massive wallet and three men's underground printing press.
Let's move to the fallout and see how this builds in Section 4, Courts, Corruption, and Chaos.
The escalation here was remarkably fast-paced. As you can see, it starts in 1865 with the post-war boom.
By 1866, the competition over the Erie really intensifies. By 1867, Vanderbilt launches his massive takeover attempt, buying up everything in sight. And then bam, 1868 hits, and this financial struggle violently erupts into full-blown political corruption and legal chaos. The system simply wasn't built to handle a war of this magnitude.
And the ensuing chaos? Truly something to behold. We're talking about dueling legal disputes and court injunctions. You had judges literally issuing contradictory orders depending on who had their ear that day. There was insanely aggressive political lobbying up in the state legislature in Albany. Widespread allegations of bribery were just everywhere. Both sides were actively weaponizing New York's political machine, pouring money into the pockets of politicians to get laws changed retroactively, either to legalize or criminalize the watered stock. The entire legal and political system of New York became a pawn in this corporate game.
So, when the dust finally settled, who actually walked away with the power? Well, looking at the aftermath, Jay Gould's legacy was pretty much cemented here. He gained this ruthless reputation as a master speculator. His negotiating tactics were brilliant, and he essentially walked away with his wealth and freedom perfectly intact, eventually becoming one of the most powerful men on Wall Street. Vanderbilt's reality, though, was kind of a mixed bag. He was powerful enough to secure a financial settlement and get some of his money back, sure, but he suffered major losses and ultimately failed to capture the Erie. And the Erie Railroad itself, it was left severely damaged, burdened with massive debt and just endless structural problems.
So the crucial point is what happened next. Section 5. The birth of modern finance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark, direct contrast between the unregulated warfare of 1868 and the highly regulated markets we know today. Look at the Gilded Age. There was a total lack of securities oversight. Today, we have the SEC monitoring every single trade. Back then, oversight just meant rampant political bribery. Today, it means strict corporate governance and independent auditing. And what about the shareholders? Well, in 1868, you were entirely vulnerable to extreme dilution by people like Gould and Fisk just printing paper. Today, minority shareholders are explicitly protected by corporate law and rights. Modern capitalism was essentially built as a giant defense mechanism against the exact tactics used in the Erie War.
So, to summarize our key takeaways from this explainer, the Erie War is absolutely vital to understand because it exposed the fatal weaknesses in early corporate governance. It boldly highlighted the incredibly dangerous intersection of massive business interests and local politics. And because it was so wildly destructive, it forced the rapid evolution of corporate law, literally giving birth to the protections that sit in your own modern investment portfolio right now. Ultimately, this battle set the historical blueprint for every hostile takeover, leveraged buyout, and proxy fight that has happened since. I want to just sit with this final quote for a second. The Erie Railroad War revealed the extraordinary opportunities and dangers of America's rapidly expanding financial system. Its battles over corporate power continue to echo through modern capitalism. That is just so spot on. From the abandoned physical train tracks of the 19th century, all the way to today's digital high-frequency trading screens, the ghost of this conflict is baked into the very DNA of how our markets operate today.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to consider. If the ruthless tactics of the Erie War forced the creation of today's corporate laws and regulations, what current corporate battles, maybe happening right now in big tech, AI, or digital currencies, are actively shaping the laws of tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. I really hope you found it as fascinating as I do. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.